Here we go! Vintage motorcycles. You guys are probably already reaching for the ibuprofen, carburetors, oil leaks, drum brakes. You're likely thinking, why the heck would I want an old, outdated, troublesome motorcycle? Well, because sometimes they are worth it. What did you think? You read the title, didn't you? Certain vintage motorcycles are easy to come by and cheap to purchase. Maybe you're the built not bought type of person who prides themselves in having a bespoke and one-of-a-kind creation in lieu of a mostly stock production bike. Well, there are plenty of vintage motorcycles that are the perfect platform for building a bike unique to your discerning taste. Or maybe you want to have a piece of history, a bike that is so iconic and recognizable that even normies will be able to identify it. There are certain vintage motorcycles that are worth pursuing despite the extra effort that it may require to keep them out on the road instead of in pieces in your garage. Hell, the Hayabusa is practically vintage, and that's the best performing and least troublesome bike I've ever owned. Alright, let's get started. Up first on the list of vintage motorcycles worth having is none other than the Honda CB750. The CB750 checks just about every box on the vintage motorcycle checklist. They are pretty easy to find. I mean, come on, Honda made practically 1 million of these puppies between 1969 and 2003. It is also iconic. It is the original UJM, a bike that forced journalists to coin the term superbike since there was no other way to describe it. It is the predecessor to just about any style of sporty street bike in some way, shape, or form. And it is likely one of the most common platforms for a cafe racer style build, so there's plenty of aftermarket support and community knowledge on the best parts and necessary modifications. There is no way I could do a vintage motorcycle list without mentioning the CB750. And while it was produced for nearly 35 years, if you're in the market for a used CB, I'd recommend a K-Series model with the original 736cc single overhead cam engine from between 1970 and 1978. Later dual overhead cam models had marginal performance gains with additional displacement, bumped up to 748 cc's, but not without a corresponding increase in overall weight. The K-Series also had the most iconic and recognizable styling with the low flat seat and the gas tank, which has become ubiquitous with the cafe racer style. The K-Series 750 has an air-cooled inline-4 engine that makes 67 horsepower and 47 foot-pounds of torque with the top speed of 120 miles per hour. They were actually the first motorcycle to come equipped with a front brake disc from the factory, although they still sport a drum brake in the rear. They also came with a pretty flashy instrumentation for the time, but something tells me you're in the market for a bike to build a cafe racer, you'll be likely deleting that and any of the other state-of-the-art tech, no matter how imperative it is to the function of the motorcycle. They'll definitely vary in price based on location and condition. Museum quality bikes in full spec are going closer to $8,000 or $9,000, while a more road-worn CB750 can be found for just a couple thousand. I know someone in Michigan who recently bought a 1974 model in running condition for $1,200 last year. Considering Honda's reliability and build quality, it isn't unheard of for these bikes to have upwards of 40,000 miles, so don't be afraid of taking a chance on a CB750 that has seen some seat time. Okay, number 2 on our list is a Harley Davidson Sportster. You probably think I've lost my mind, not just the slowest and most underpowered Harley, but an old, slow, and underpowered Harley. But bear with me here for a second. We know Harleys are anything but advanced, and when dealing with older bikes, sometimes that ends up working in your favor. Until the past year with the release of the Sportster S and the newly announced Nightster, the Sportster platform was only marginally updated over the last 40 years. They've had the same Evolution engine since 1986, gained a 5th speed in the gearbox in 1991, rubber-mounted engines in 2004, and fuel injection in 2007. I mean, parts are readily available, and these bikes are easy as hell to work on. A Sportster is literally like a BMX bike with an engine in it. Half the fun of these bikes comes from modifying it, and there's a ton of different possibilities for builds. You go cafe or club style, make it a raked out Easy Rider chopper, or hire Spite to put a big bore 1275cc hooligan kit in it. There's literally a guy on YouTube who made a Turbo Sportster Scrambler that was able to utilize stock engine internals. That's kinda nuts. The line of motorcycles was slow to evolve, sure, but if you're in the market for a cool heritage motorcycle that you ultimately want to build up, it might make sense to pick up an old Sportster for a few $1,000 as opposed to buying a brand new one from a dealership for $12,000. There are countless different trim options and models available throughout the years, but for example, I'm looking at a 2000 XL883 with an aftermarket exhaust and 12,000 miles for $3,000 in Indiana. Man, you gotta love the Midwest. That is like a month of rent in some parts of the country. Next on the list is the legendary Kawasaki GPZ900R, the original Ninja, the original squid missile fueled by Monster and Yeet Energy. Wait, Monster definitely didn't exist in 1984, so what do the Cowie simps of the day drink then? Probably cocaine. I digress. This bike is super iconic. Before scaring everyone on the internet with laughter, Tom Cruise made it a recognizable household motorcycle when he rode it on the airstrip in Top Gun. The Ninja came out in 1984 after being developed in secret for over 6 years by Kawasaki. It featured the world's first 16-valve liquid-cooled inline 4-cylinder motorcycle engine and redefined the modern sport bike. It has a 908cc engine that makes 115 horsepower and 65 foot-pounds of torque. And those numbers are pretty good for nowadays too. And it was the first fully stock production motorcycle to pass 150 miles per hour. It had air suspension in the front and rear, dual disc brakes up front, and a single disc out back. It was outfitted with full fairings, and while considered to be a serious performance machine, it came in weighing nearly 550 pounds. That is Hayabusa spec nowadays. It was manufactured until 2003 or so, and there likely are still a few floating around out there. I see one from 1986 being listed for $5,500. It has stickers on the gas tank, but I feel like that just comes with the Ninja territory. We're gonna go off-road for number 4 with my next pick, the XT500 from Yamaha. If you've ever had even the slightest interest in riding motorcycles off-road, you are likely familiar with the XT500. This is another iconic industry-leading motorcycle from the glory days of enduro riding. The XT was produced between 1976 and 1989, and it was the predecessor to bikes like the Tenere 700, as it won the Paris-Nice and the Paris-Dakar rallies in the late 70s. The XT500 had an air-cooled 499cc single-cylinder 4-stroke engine that made roughly 40 horsepower and 30 foot-pounds of torque. It had a 5-speed gearbox, and they were capable of crushing miles on the pavement and off-road with versatile capabilities the industry had yet to see from a single motorcycle. There is a 1979 model in original condition for sale in Idaho for $3,200. Air-cooled, kickstart, single-cylinder, there's not much you can do to break the thing short of throwing it off a building or setting it on fire. RIP Gixxer 250, you will be missed. The last American motorcycle on our list is another recommendation for those of you who like really obscure types of things, the type of riders who don't want to purchase your typical Japanese sport bike like everyone else. It would be too easy and too obvious and maybe too sensible. They bleed red, white, and blue just like the leather daddies over at the Screaming Eagle Tavern, but they lust after the fast boy life. If you haven't caught on by what I mean now, it's the Buell XB12R Firebolt. The Firebolt is a corn-fed American-made sport bike that came out in 2004 and utilized the 1203cc engine from the Sportster 1200. It made 103 horsepower and 84 foot-pounds of torque and only weighed 395 pounds before necessary fluids, of which the oil was in the frame. The Firebolt handled like a dream due to the low center of gravity. One aspect of Buell's design ethos was mass centralization. There's a your mom joke in there somewhere, but I just can't figure it out right now. And with the narrow V-twin engine layout, the exhaust muffler slung underneath the engine, the Firebolt was ultra nimble and flickable. Buell implemented proprietary technology that electronically adjusted a butterfly valve within the exhaust to maintain optimal torque and horsepower while riding, making it a bit more satisfying experience than you would expect from a Harley-Davidson engine. It had fully adjustable Showa suspension in the front and rear and plenty of fun and quirky Buell things like a huge floating brake rotors near the outside of the wheel and a frame that doubled as a fuel tank. Not the oil tank, I said that earlier, but it's not correct. If you're looking for a unique torque-happy V-twin and sporty attire, keep your eyes peeled for a used XB12R. You can find one for around $7,000, and while the Firebolt was manufactured until 2009, making it the youngest of our vintage bikes, there is still something about it that is futuristic yet rudimentary in its design that makes you feel like it's truly come from another era. Plus, Buell is back in business, so hop on the Buell train early and be a true trendsetter. As an anecdotal side note, we tested a Buell XB9 a while back, and I was very impressed with how it handled. We pitted it up against an MT-09, and I kind of wanted to be on the Buell, but again, that motor, absolute dog. Okay, we're getting closer to the end of our collection of vintage bikes worth having. Motorcycle number 6 on said list is the Ducati 851. This is one of those bikes you should probably actually avoid riding too often, not just because its only thing less reliable than a Ducati is a Ducati from 1989, but also it's because it's just so damn beautiful. I mean, come on, look at this thing. You can park it in front of your grandma, your girlfriend, or the Cracker Barrel out of a freeway, and you can be sure that just about every single person is gonna know that it's a Ducati. It's a truly beautiful motorcycle with paint as bold and red as marinara sauce. The 851 was released in 1987 and featured an updated 851cc V-twin, L-twin engine with 4-valve desmodromic heads. The bike was making 102 horsepower and 52 foot-pounds of torque, which are pretty respectable numbers even for today, and it quickly became a worthy contender to the Japanese superbikes back in the day, as the 851 won 6 different championship races during the late 1980s and early 1990s. 90 Ducatis. They were so good at winning races. Finding an 851 in running condition will likely be no easy feat, but if you can, you will own a piece of history. Seriously, don't ride it. Just put it in your living room behind a pane of glass and look at it every day. There's one for sale in Pennsylvania for $14,500. The last bike on our list, coming in at spot number 7, is another option for riders with European sensibilities that like to turn a wrench every now and then. I'm talking about the BMW K100, often referred to as the Flying Brick. The K100 is a motorcycle that is powered by what could be described as a 4-cylinder toaster oven. It's a big, shaft-driven unit of a motorcycle that has found new purpose as of late as the cafe racer platform of choice for riders who find the CB750 not esoteric enough for their tastes. The K100 was produced by BMW for 10 years between 1982 and 1999, coming in a variety of trim options from naked to sport fairing to full touring outfit. The engineers over at BMW decided to do things a little differently and turn their 4-cylinder engine right on its side, allowing for less power loss in the drive shaft compared to a vertical 4-cylinder engine. It's also provided easy access to the cylinders on the left side of the motorcycle and the drive shaft on the right. The K100 makes 90 horsepower and 50 foot-pounds of torque and weighs in at 540 pounds depending on the trim. The K100 is a blank canvas for whatever style of riding you want to do. You can have a big dadmobile that rivals a Goldwing, or you can strip it down and have a cafe-style bike. They are pretty easy to find and can cost anywhere from $3,000 to $8,000 depending on condition. I'm looking at a fully built cafe-style K100 from 1985 for $6,700 in New York. Fact: Bluetooth technology was named after a 10th century king, King Harald Bluetooth. He united Denmark and Norway, just like the technology united computers and cell phones. Goodbye.